All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening and welcome to Destination Imagination Colorado's Instant Challenge webinar. We have three affiliate challenge masters here with us this evening. Andrea Lose.
Did that work?
Oh yeah, Paul, you're good.
There's Paul.
So we have Andrea Lose online. Andrea, can you say hello?
Hi, guys.
And we have Cara Rafferty.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Paul Naslund.
Hello, everyone.
So they are going to be giving their presentation. If you have questions for the presenters, please type them into your chat panel, and I will interrupt the presenters when it's appropriate to ask those questions. So if everybody could just type questions you have in the question box. The first thing, though, we'd like to know is if you are new to DI or if you are an experienced team manager. So if you can just type in into your question box whether you are new or experienced, that would be great. And I will let the Instant Challenge crew take over. Go ahead, guys.
So first off, I hope everybody can see the screen that we're sharing. You should see Affiliate Challenge Masters with our names and email addresses in case you have questions or comments for us throughout the year. So hopefully you all get that. Yeah, everybody can see that, right? Paul, Andrea, you guys can see that too, right?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes, perfect. I see it.
Perfect. So that's all that. And we can send out, this is a PowerPoint, we can send this out through email. If you send one of us your email address, we can also send you this PowerPoint and the other things that we can show you later on through this call. So if you send us your email address, we can get this to you as well.
Cara, we already collected email. We collected email addresses, so I'll give those to you tomorrow.
Cool. Perfect. So never mind. Don't send us your email. We already have it. All right.
I just want to make a correction as well. This is Andrea speaking. It says that I'm the Boulder Regional Challenge Master, but I am now Cherry Creek. So if you are Cherry Creek, then you can send any questions to me if you have any questions about our regional tournament.
All right. So basically, this is quick, defined instant challenge. If you're new, the instant challenge is just basically an instant version of your main challenge. It's a real quick 5 to 7 minute creative problem solving challenge. There are a few different aspects. Instant challenge is secret. We hold it in a separate part during the tournament. You're not allowed to share any information about anything that happens in the instant challenge room, because every instant challenge that we're given could also be given to somebody else in the state, and we don't want there to be an unfair advantage for a certain team if they hear any sort of information about what the instant challenge has in it, whether it's building or structure building or performance-based. We don't want to share any of that information so that everybody starts at a level playing field. They are worth 100 points. We like it if you can check in 15 minutes early so that we can get everything organized. One team manager is allowed into the instant challenge room, and the team can decide if they even want a team manager in the room or not. Typically, it's better, we think, if the team manager goes in, because you can have a different opinion or a different view on what happens in the room and can kind of help lead them once you are out of the room on things that went well, things that didn't go well, and have a different opinion on that. Also the team can decide if a certain team member doesn't want to go in, they can make that choice. I think it's at least 2 team members have to be in the instant challenge, though. Correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Right. So as long as 2 team members go into the room, they can do it with 2 team members. So if a team member is not particularly confident in their instant challenge skills, they can opt out of doing the instant challenge.
If they do choose to opt out, they need to decide before they walk into the instant challenge room. So that's something that they would need to let the appraisers know about before they walked in. So it's not like they could walk into the room and say, oh, we're doing a building challenge, I'm not good at those, I'm going to sit this one out. So that decision does need to be made prior to their competing in instant challenge.
We also really encourage all team members to participate in the IC.
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Paul or Andrea, do you want to keep going?
Sure. So one of the types of instant challenges that you'll see are performance-based challenges. And this is where the team needs to put together some sort of performance in a very short amount of time. So we're not looking for teams to write a whole script out, but they just need to put together a skit with a beginning, middle, and end. That's the big part that we look for a performance-based challenge. They could have props that they need to use, so things that are provided for them. So we've seen anything from a garden hose to a broom to a dustpan to a feather duster, anything like that. They could also use imaginary props, so everything's imaginary. They also could create props, so if they're given materials, they could create their own props and design a performance around that. Also, they just could not use props, so that's a performance-based challenge.
Sometimes team members actually, some of them are the prop, like some would be a tree or a table. I mean, we've seen that too.
And you can do that with your team members that aren't as good at performing. If they get kind of nervous at those things, they can be those supporting roles of being a prop or even being a narrator or something like that.
Absolutely.
So as far as a task-based challenge goes, that is something where they need to build an object that completes some sort of objective. So we've seen things where they need to build a tower that needs to be a certain height, or build a bridge that needs to hold weight with a certain span. We've also seen things where they need to move different objects from behind the taped line. So they need to build some sort of device given the materials and move different objects. That could be from one bowl to another, or they need to sort things by color. So we've seen things like that. To change and communicate, that would be something like the team needs to communicate to other members of their team different colors to sort, or different locations to place a pin on a map. And a lot of times those communication ones are nonverbal, and or the kids can't see each other. There's also combinations of those kind of challenges where they need to build something and build a performance around what they have built. So we call those combination challenges.
The one thing that's interesting, I just want to add on task-based challenges, there's usually always going to be some kind of a boundary or blue taped area where the building will take place, or where objects will be placed when the team gets done making it, or if it's moving something, there's usually some kind of a line. So just an important, especially if you're new at Instant Challenge, we've actually had teams make their creations, either towers or bridges or whatever it is they're doing, and sometimes they forget to place the item into the blue taped area where the structure is tested or where the tower is measured, and so that it's an easy thing to overlook. It's since we're online here, I don't know if people have a picture of walking into a room and seeing a table with a blue taped square, or a floor with a blue line on it, or a blue taped off area, blue taped area.
So that may be something you want to practice with your teams. If they need to build something that needs to be in the taped area by the end of part 1 or something like that, that would be suggested, because we do see some teams that miss out on some points because they just forget to do that last minute thing.
Okay. So, sorry. Basically, it's a pretty simple way that it works. It's kind of like with your main challenge. You're going to check in, just your team name and all of that information. We do a pledge that is basically, we promise we won't say anything about what we're about to do, and we promise we don't know anything about what we're about to do. And then they'll hang out in holding until we're ready for them. They'll go in, do their instant challenge. Hopefully there will be a place for you and your team to sit and discuss, and we call that the chill out. And once you leave chill out, we ask that you don't say anything. No parents can know, no other teams. You don't even want to whisper at it secretly, because you never know who is around you that might be doing that same exact challenge. And we, like I said before, we really want it to be a level playing field. But you'll be in the instant challenge room for about 10 to 15 minutes usually, because we do, we read the challenge to everybody, and then you'll do the challenge, and the challenge can go from 5 to 7 minutes. And so it's a pretty simple flow.
When you go into that instant challenge room, team members are given 2 copies of the instant challenge to read while the appraisers read the challenge aloud in the room. And so one of the things you can practice, and this is part of this flow, if you'll go back just one slide for just a half a sec, and the chill out process is something you can do on your own also. So you can practice after they do a performance or after they build something. You can talk about what they did, what they would have liked to have done, some things that they're learning as they go. Are they getting better at building towers? Are they getting better at telling stories? And so that's kind of what you do in chill out as well. And sometimes emotions, people get a little frazzled that something didn't work the way they'd hoped. So it's a chance for people to calm down before they have to go back out in the public.
And Paul brought up a good point about chill out being something that you don't only do at the tournament. Chill out can be something that's really important as you practice with your teams an instant challenge before the tournament happens. So really kind of decompress with the kids and just say, okay, what went well, what didn't? What could we have done better? Did we use the materials creatively? How was our teamwork? And we'll talk about the rubrics and how those look. And we would like for the team to just get to a point where they can evaluate themselves and kind of say, okay, this is where we think we would fall, and this is how we think that we could improve. So chill out's one of the most important things leading up to the tournament, and that's really where kids learn how they can improve in their instant challenge. They can even do the challenge again during your practice as well, which is a great way to improve.
I was about to suggest that as well, that after you do chill out, have the team do the challenge again and then do another evaluation saying, okay, what was different after we knew what we were walking into? And it can really, really help teams, definitely. So this is just basically what I said before about the pledge. They're going to read the challenge, do the challenge, and then chill out, which we discussed. And then this video, I think that's the bus stop video, right, Andrea? Is that what that video is supposed to be?
Bridge video that we had shown.
And I do not have a copy of that video. So I can't show this. This was a video of an instant challenge. I know that there are videos of instant challenges unofficially on YouTube if you want to see a challenge being done. Something else that was suggested at the training that we did on Saturday was maybe trying to find an experienced team in your area and seeing if you guys could get together and watch them do an instant challenge and then have them watch you do an instant challenge and do sort of a mini instant challenge day with another team in your area. So you can see how other teams do instant challenges and maybe learn something from each other as well.
I do have a tower and bridge video if we do want to watch it, but I didn't know if we would have time tonight. So if we really, really want to see it, I can certainly pull it up.
I wanted to add just one thing. When you do an instant challenge, you don't have to run it all the way from beginning to end. If you're just starting brand new with instant challenge, you could read the description of the challenge and stop and ask the team if they understand what it is that they're being asked to do. A lot of teams kind of get lost. The instructions for instant challenge is pretty long. It probably takes 30 to 45 seconds to read some of them. And I notice, especially young teams, that they kind of check out after the first 2 or 3 sentences that we read to them. And so that's a skill they need to learn how to practice, is actually understanding what they're being asked to do. So it might be a point at which you read the scene or the setup, the very first paragraph of the challenge, and ask the team, okay, what is it that we're being asked to do? And then stop and discuss that for a little bit. You don't have to just then run to the next setup, next point, which would probably be a 5-minute segment where they build or plan their story. And that way you can help them just realize that when they get into an instant challenge, a lot of difficulty is actually just understanding for sure what it is they need to do. And then at that point, then you can dive into the building sequence, and then finally, the presentation of the story, or the testing of their bridge, or the measuring of how high their structure is after time. And even in those timed elements, let's say you've got 5 minutes to build a tower. For some teams, when they're very new to instant challenge, even 5 minutes might seem like it's rushing through things. So you can give them more time, and then you could do it again and say, okay, now let's see if you can do this in 3 minutes, now that you know what you're doing, or 4 minutes, whatever. It's just things like that. I just wanted to interject that sometimes you don't have to do the first instant challenge you ever try completely in the time sequence that it would be in the tournament room, and then you can slowly start to get used to how it'll feel. If this were a tournament, then we'd read the challenge, and then your 5 minutes would start for planning or building, depending on the type of challenge. And so they kind of get used to that without feeling so apprehensive every time you do instant challenge that it's always feeling rushed.
All right, so scoring is scaled, and there's objective versus subjective, and we've got rubrics here. Looks like we're missing the performance rubric on here. But with the objective scoring, it is much simpler because it's objective, obviously, that if you do this, you get this many points. For the other things, the subjective scoring, these are kind of an example of how we appraise that. And typically, kids think if you get in that 1 to 5 range out of 20 that that's failing, and that is not the case at all. Typically, we see a lot of teams in that 1 to 5 range of some materials being used in common ways. And something else that was brought up at the Saturday training was a question of, do we give more points the more materials that are used? Do we require, for it to be creative, do we want all of the materials used? And I think we came up pretty much all together, the majority was that you do not have to use all the materials to get a lot of creativity points. If the materials are all used in a very creative way, obviously that's something we love to see. But as long as the materials that are being used in a creative way, they will get a very good creative score on that. So
I think
just like,
sorry if I want to interject. I think the part that we found with teams is that teams think that they need to build something that's like extremely creative and just dazzles us. But teams need to keep in mind that a lot of the score, when they do have an objective part, most of the score comes from that objective piece. So we've seen as much as 90% of the score coming from, did you accomplish these objectives? So don't let creativity get in the way of achieving what you need to, because if you get a really creative structure, but it doesn't do what it needs to do, then that won't help you in the long run in terms of how many points you'll get.
We used an example to illustrate this a little further at the meeting we had Saturday, where you have a taped off square that's about, I think it was 3 feet or 4 feet taped off, and in the middle of that 4 foot by 4 foot square was a vase, and teams were trying to get marbles into the vase. That was the challenge, but they couldn't cross the taped line with their body, so they had to build some kind of a device to get the marbles into that vase. And most of the teams tried to come up with something very elaborate and did not get very many marbles into the vase, yet most of the score, I think there was only 10 points for creativity of the materials, and the rest of it was just scoring for teamwork and also how many marbles were actually put in the vase. And ironically, there was a yardstick that was provided that they could use, and even the yardstick had a hole in the end of it that they could have simply placed marbles on the yardstick and then dumped them into the vase. They could have also built a separate device that was creative at the same time. It was an interesting challenge because even the high school teams didn't use the yardstick to get the marbles into the jar, and that was where most of the points were in that challenge. So sometimes it's a little tricky, and you might even want to read the challenges upside down. In other words, start with the scoring first. And that's part of kind of like the comprehension piece I was talking about a minute ago. When you hear the instructions of what they're supposed to do, also teams can also evaluate, okay, where am I going to get most of the points? And if it was just putting marbles into the vase, then really we don't care what it looks like as long as we get it in there. And so it might change strategy. You know, teams will spend more time, you know, trying to get the marbles in simpler ways rather than trying to get really fancy. And that was just that challenge.
Yeah. But yeah, like they were saying, a lot of times we'll see them, see the team members working very, very hard to make something very creative, and then kind of hurting themselves a little bit because they're not quite getting all of those objective scoring points. And then for teamwork, one main thing that I wanted to touch on with teamwork is that teams don't necessarily have to always agree. A lot of teams I've seen are almost afraid to disagree with each other in the instant challenge room, and that's not the case. Part of being a team and part of working with other people is not always agreeing on an idea. We would like to see them disagree in a kind way. Hopefully there's no name calling or anything like that. But I've seen some teams, and I'm sure everybody has seen some teams where they're so afraid to disagree with one another, they just kind of sit there and talk ideas the whole time and hardly anything gets done. And so just because, you know, and just because people think that disagreeing means that you aren't working well together, disagreeing is a very important part of getting to a solution. And so don't be afraid, don't let your team be afraid to disagree, and they have to learn to kind of move on from talking about it to doing it. A lot of time can get wasted in that idea process, and so we'd like them to be able to go from picking an idea to working on it and not wasting time, especially in something as short-timed as the instant challenge.
Right, I feel like there have been times where I've seen teams that have been so coached that it's to their disadvantage. I've seen teams that walk away from the table of materials and they sit in a circle and raise their hands and want to share their ideas. And that's certainly good, but if the team spends 3 of their 5 minutes sharing their ideas and saying, yes, I agree with Jimmy, that's not a good use of their time. So it's something that teamwork just tends to come naturally. We can tell when teams are too far coached. So it should be something that just happens naturally, and they say, okay, maybe a minute is enough for us to decide, then we need to move on. And like Cara said, it's okay to disagree, as long as it's in a respectful way. And even if the team has to just come to a vote, that's okay as well.
I think, you know, you can practice that to see, you know, if your team can make up its mind in a minute or less what they're going to try. And then as they get more experience, if they know they're building a tower, for example, they may even be able to start building almost immediately if they understand what it is they're trying to do. I'm not saying that we always build towers, but just at the point, if they recognize the instant challenge as something similar that they've seen before, they might be able to jump in even faster. But we've certainly seen a lot of teams spend an enormous amount of time just talking about what they're going to do and forgetting to actually do anything. And some challenge.
How much time is left? 30 seconds to build. So that's not.
And then the panic sets in. Yeah.
Well,
panic
and
is
some
never
of
good.
some of the challenges only have one part, and you have to have everything done. And some teams think, oh, this is the 5 minutes is for planning, and it's not true. They also have to be completely ready to present what they've built at that same time. So yeah, some of the challenges catch you by surprise.
Another point in teamwork that I personally really love seeing, I'm sure that Andrea and Paul also like seeing this as well, where a team will walk in and they see it's either building or performance or whatever the challenge may be, and they turn to a team member and say, you are great at building, what's your idea on this? Or you are great at writing a story, writing a script, what's your idea? I love knowing that the team members know each other's strengths and skills. And to me, that plays a huge part in teamwork. It shows that they've worked together and they understand each other, and then they're willing to follow each other on whoever's skill level is the best for that challenge. So I really love seeing that in an instant challenge room as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're going to watch the Tower and Bridge challenge or not. Will we be watching that video?
We certainly can if you guys want to. I'll just need to pull it up.
There's just a few points where we can stop and explain, because I'm assuming that a lot of people are new that are
So it's about
with us tonight.
It's about half and half about people who are new and people that aren't new.
Okay.
So would you guys like to see a video? Just type into your question box if you'd like to see the video of an instant challenge in action. If that would be helpful, type in yes. We'll see if we have some into the question box. We're also going to take some questions a little bit later for the experienced team managers as well. So it looks like the majority of people want to see it. There's a couple people that don't. Just play solitaire for a minute and then.
Well, can we all, as we go, can we pause it again like we did at certain points?
Yeah, just let me know when you want me to. I'm pulling it up right now.
And
Okay.
remember to ask questions. These all three of these volunteers have appraised at Global Finals and have been to Global Finals and know a lot about how appraisers think. So please feel free to put any question in the question box, and we'll make sure we get to them so we get all of your needs.
Well, and Paul was a team manager, and Andrea and I are both team alums, so we have a lot of sides of information as well. So don't be afraid to ask.
And there's, even if you think of a question later, just please send it forward. We're happy to try to answer anything.
Yeah,
Do you need me to send you to make you the presenter, Kate?
It's still pulling up right now, so.
Okay.
So a couple of questions. We have a YouTube channel, and this webinar will be on the YouTube channel, as will I can put that presentation up, the video that she's pulling up. I can get that on our YouTube channel as well. So then if you want to share it with your team members or other team managers in your school, you can also do that.
Yeah, and you could actually dissect the video the same way that we will. Just stop and look. What's helpful, if we can get this video working, it helps you identify what the team roles are. In other words, this team that does this challenge is very experienced, and you can actually see, everybody's. They know what they're going to do already. You know which ones are the builders and which ones are just kind of staying out of the way.
Okay, I have it ready if you want to switch over to me, Cara.
All right, I got it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Andrea.
That works.
Okay, do we have it?
Yep.
Okay.
There we go.
This instant challenge is actually, it's kind of old. It's from Global Finals 2001, so it's close to when DI began. And the challenge is called Tower and Bridge. And is this a middle or a secondary level team? Kate?
It looks
Pretty
like
sure
a
it's
secondary.
I think it was secondary. So this team actually, they are pretty successful. Not all teams look like this, but we can kind of discuss as we go. Paul, if you want me to pause, just let me know. But we can discuss kind of what's happening and how we would appraise this team. All right.
Together with your team manager?
Oh, can you skip this?
Yeah, you can skip.
The promise is actually done in the hallway before you actually even go into the challenge room, usually.
Yep. Let's see, I think I'm in the right spot. So they hand them 2 copies of the challenge.
Okay, your challenge today is called Tower and Bridge. Your challenge is to build a tower that is as high as possible and that will hold as much weight as possible when the tower becomes a bridge. You will have up to 6 minutes to use your imagination to build your tower and up to 1 minute to turn your tower into a bridge and add weight. Setup. On the table are a taped area within which you must build your tower and 2 bricks that your tower must span when you turn it into a bridge. There is also a table with materials to use in building your tower, a pair of tongs to use in moving the tower, and a set of weights to add to the bridge in order to obtain score. In part 1, you will have 6 minutes. Use the materials on the table to build a tower that is as high as possible. At the end of part 1, your tower must be within the taped area. The appraisers then will measure the height of your tower to the nearest inch. In part 2, you will have 1 minute. Pick up the tower with the tongs and place it on the 2 bricks to become a bridge. Only the tongs may touch the tower. If anything other than the tongs touches the tower, time will end. Pieces of the tower may fall off as it is being changed into a bridge. Once the tower has become a bridge, you may not cut the bridge. However, you may add sets of weights one at a time to the bridge between the bricks until the bridge no longer spans the gap or a set of weights touches the floor or the bricks. Your materials to use are 8 pencils, 8 straws, 8 index cards, 4 sheets of paper, 6 mailing labels, 4 paper clips, 2 rubber bands, 2 12-inch pieces of string, 1 pair of tongs that may not be damaged, and 10 sets of weights that may not be damaged. For scoring, you will receive 3 points for each full inch your structure rises above the floor, 20 points if your tower becomes a bridge, 5 points for each set of weights supported by your bridge, up to 20 points for how creatively you use the materials, and up to 20 points for how well your team works together. Again, your challenge is to build a tower that is as high as possible and that will hold as much weight as possible when the tower becomes a bridge.
Okay, let's hit pause right here for a sec.
Part 1, you have 6 minutes.
Okay, so now here's where, if you don't have an experienced team, you may want to stop and just make sure that they understand what they need to do. Unfortunately, this video didn't show the table. Now you can finally see it. There's the taped off area, the 2 bricks. I think we have copies of this challenge that you can look at too that we can send out. But anyway, for young teams, this was a lot of information. So I can already tell you from experience that a lot of teams had already probably now reread the rules probably for the next 30 seconds and talk to each other to try to understand what they just heard. And at this point, if they have questions, they can always ask the appraisers to clarify something or to explain something further if they don't understand it. So tell it's perfectly fine for your team to ask an appraiser a question, and if they don't understand something, they can't tell them how they're going to do it, you know, but they can at least help clarify what the instructions are. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
All right, cool.
Begin.
Okay, guys.
Who wants to keep track of time?
Okay, and then who wants to summarize how many points you can get?
I think we get the most points from the tower into a bridge, because that's 20 points right there to become the bridge. And then put weight on it is 5 points for every weight.
So I want to have a strong bridge mainly.
Yeah, and then just try to add height as you can.
So, okay.
What do you guys want to do?
Any ideas? What I think that
The benches would be the strongest for
the bridge, yeah. We can add the straws.
For the height.
So let's take
We use the straws to balance the weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's stay up high. I'll hold the cables together.
Okay.
Okay, Amanda, you guys do the straws and I'll.
You guys got the straws together?
Yeah, we got it. You want to use the mailing labels?
Oh, wait, is there like
We have
a-
rubber bands and
Yeah. You know, actually, why don't, well, even though we don't get any points for it, why don't like Circe and I kind of entertain the judges while you guys. Okay, here we go.
Okay, let's hit stop for a sec.
Like you with a top scientist on our new
Did you want me to pause it?
Yeah, that'll be good. Okay, so now the team dissected the challenge and talked to each other. They, obviously were able, they didn't have to ask any questions, but they quickly planned. I don't even think they've used a full minute now, and they're already starting to build. Also, a lot of times materials are on one table, and the area where you're going to build is on another. So it's okay for you to bring all the materials over to where you're going to work. And I don't know if you noticed that. It's a little choppy, the video I'm looking at, but they brought all the materials over and are going to build right there on the site. Now, sometimes you have to make sure that you clear the area when you're done and just leave what's supposed to be in the taped area. But that's an experienced move that a lot of teams forget to do, is bring everything over to where you're going to be actually building. Sometimes you have to build on the floor. If you don't have a tall team, and we know we're going to have a young team do something, a lot of times we'll put things on the floor rather than on a table, so that as they build a tall tower, they can actually reach the top of it. So anyway, this team is going to do something unusual here. You'll see it as we go. Okay.
Research project. Mr. Scientist, will you please tell us what's going on?
Yes, we're building a large rocket to destroy the moon because it's obstructing my view of Jupiter.
Oh, yeah. And what does your view of Jupiter have to do with the moon?
I enjoy watching Jupiter with my wife on a nice romantic evening. It's very fun. I can have a good time as well. The moon is very obtrusive and it's, gray and disgusting. I mean, look at it. It's all these craters.
So what do you think the citizens of the world are going to be reacting to the destruction of the moon?
Oh, nice.
Make sure we save one to attach these.
Yeah.
I see your point.
Yeah, we
Anything else would be possible humanitarian use for this rocket after it's constructed?
That's big enough to.
It's really going to be that hard. Very fast. My name is Dr. Plutonium. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Dr. Plutonium.
All right.
Yes. So actually, I'm going to ask a question to some of our workers on the project here. Project workers, what do you have to say about this new rocket that's being constructed?
can't talk about it. It's highly top secret. Go away. What are you doing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's we're getting close to the countdown, and the rocket shall be launching any minute now.
Starting to look quite impressive there.
Yes, there's a huge rock tailpiece that's going to lift this rocket off into the moon.
Okay, let's hit pause right there, please. All right, thanks. Okay, sorry it's a little choppy if it is for you. When you rewatch this, we really haven't had much time elapsed yet in the challenge, but this team has learned how to build a tripod in the past. I mean, it's a simple building element. At Globals this year, one possible solution was to build a telescope on top of a tripod to, create kind of like a fishing pole. But a tripod is something that I would encourage your teams to learn how to build. It seems simple, but when you're kind of under the time constraints, it seems, and depending on the materials. This team also is good with the mailing labels. As you can see, they've created a really strong leg there with the pencils. And again, that's a skill, just learning how to build. This team uses straws for the height. They've connected the straws end to end. And also this table is a little bit slippery. So I don't know if you can see that one leg is actually resting against the taped square. And so that can kind of keep things from slipping a little bit. And the erasers on the pencils can keep things from slipping. If you're on a carpet, that's always a lot nicer because the friction isn't a problem. Also, another skill, and this team doesn't do it, but another possibility, and there's a lot of possibilities of ways to build towers, but another one would be to roll paper into tubes, and I would imagine this was something that some teams did, and especially if you can roll them really in tight, tiny tube circles, in just a real tiny circle, you can make a tube that's extremely strong. And again, just see if your team can build a tripod in under a minute. This team did a pretty good job of getting this tower together pretty fast. All right, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
I don't want to worry myself with inconsequential details.
So you really didn't have anything to do with the project at all, did you?
I was heading this project.
But
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
How much time?
What's that, guys?
10 seconds.
So we have time to add.
Wow, yeah, we're adding. Wow,
Keep
it's
adding.
even, looks like it's even bigger than we'd originally planned.
Yes, we're gonna make it pretty now.
Yeah. I think that'll have a big important effect on me. You think? It looks like the rocket is done ahead of schedule, and we're going to proceed to
Excellent.
phase 2.
Well done, my son.
Okay, Chris. Okay, that's okay.
It's in the box.
Okay, can we hit pause for a sec?
In college, yeah, it's called.
Okay, this team finished early. Their tower is still standing. Sometimes this is where things go wrong with a lot of teams, is they can't get this, something to happen, and this is where it can be very frustrating. Unfortunately, we don't get to see what happens when things go wrong and how teams can recover, but this is something to work on. If teams can't get a certain thing done, just, you can work with them. It's not interference for you to actually, step in there and say, okay, let's try this, have you thought about this? Because an instant challenge, if it was a tournament, you could not say anything. As you can see, the team manager has to just sit in that chair and be completely quiet with a good poker face. And that's something you're going to have to work on, especially when things aren't going well, to just still, be encouraging, looking, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, what I just want to say is this team is also now quickly reading through the rules again to make sure they haven't missed something, because they're about to ask the judges to measure the structure ahead of schedule. They're not going to wait until the judges call time and say your time is up. And the reason they're doing this is in case their tower should fall over, they want to get it measured. I think there's usually like a rule of 2 seconds or something like that. And again, that's not a hard, fast rule, but just common sense. Is the tower at least standing on its own? And in the taped area, they're just trying to make sure everything's set, but they're going to, so you can actually, as you go, you can actually have the judges measure early if you'd rather do that. You don't have to wait for time to expire. So, all right, that's all I wanted to say. I don't know if anyone has anything else.
Great.
We need to measure it.
Oh,
That would be the plan.
we have to make sure that.
Why not?
Make sure that when we're doing it, that we don't touch. Yeah, everyone like,
Yeah.
put it on, hold it on the side.
Higher.
One person, or two.
Yeah, 2 people.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah.
You do?
Okay,
Thank you.
I got it.
What do you read? Yeah.
Oh, it's 46 1/4 plus.
Wow.
Wow. take off like this strong, basically.
Yeah, if they stay on. Everybody back away, so when you like you have 1 minute to you have 1 minute to move the bridge and add your weights. Begin.
Wait, you can take off.
Be careful not to touch the bridge. Don't touch the bridge. Okay.
This bridge is strong.
Just put it in the middle. Put it right there.
We have to be in the middle or not. Yeah.
Just put them on.
Yeah, let's do
Go.
this.
We only have a minute. So we got you guys. So strong. Wow. Super decent. Super cool, fellas.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we got
Did you like that? Good fun?
Okay, so I think we'll pause it there.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Cara, do you want to go back and show the rubric?
Yeah.
Let me just interject too. This team is allowed to touch their tower with the tongs to move it, but what's also interesting, they could, if they wanted to, if it was starting to come apart, they could have actually used those weights to kind of move things and situate it, as long as they don't touch. It's just kind of a weird unspoken rule that, you know, as you put the weights on, the weights can touch the tower now as a bridge, and so sometimes teams will kind of fix things as they go. As you see, these weights have ropes on them. They could actually tie something together with it. I mean, you might see some weird things, but it's actually allowed because the weights can touch the bridge. It didn't say you couldn't wrap the rope around the bridge a few times to make it a little stronger, or that string or whatever those weights are tied together with. So I'm just saying, sometimes you find loopholes, and they're kind of fun.
So we have a question about when does the time start? Is it as soon as the challenge is read? And if you have questions, does the time stop?
No, the time.
Time does not stop when you ask questions, but all questions have to wait until time has started. You cannot ask any questions until that time has started.
So when the challenge is read, the whole challenge will be read through, and then the beginning part will be read again, like your task is to build a tower that transforms into a bridge. And then immediately after that, the timekeeper will begin time. So you saw in this video there was a little bit of a delay. That's not typically how it will run at the tournament.
Exactly.
You know.
And then one point I wanted to make, Paul was talking about how it didn't say that you couldn't use the weights to tie things together. That's kind of a main rule with all of DI. If it doesn't say you can't, you can. And that's kind of important for instant challenges to kind of look for those little loopholes, because that can really help teams a lot when it comes down to it.
Well, yeah, so say like in the case of a team that something was coming apart, they could have tried to fix it with those weights and using those as well as the tongs. So sometimes you'll see all the team members come in together they'll all grab weights or something or whatever it is and try to repair something that's coming apart as they go, just touching only the things they're allowed to touch.
So looking at the rubric here, we had a lot of questions about how we would appraise the creative use of materials on our training on Saturday. And this is kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where most of their points came from those objective scores of how tall it was and how many weights it held. So they didn't really use those materials super creatively, but they got a lot of points because they were effective in their use.
So I think Cara and I said we would probably put them into the 1 to 5 range, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were 6 to 10.
Yeah.
Cara and I are alumni, so we typically tend to score a little bit lower because we can be a little bit tougher on teams. But it kind of varies among the appraisers, and they'll just stay consistent with themselves throughout the day. But in our opinion, it was pretty typical use of the materials.
I just like the simplicity of it. And so for me, I thought that was helpful to not be too complicated.
As far as teamwork goes, we have had a lot of discussions about the two guys that were off to the side that were kind of doing the interview with the scientist. Kind of our consensus as we've talked as challenge masters is that they really weren't doing anything to contribute to the solution of the challenge. So they,
and in fact, it was actually pretty distracting.
Yeah, they were certainly entertaining, but they were at points distracting the appraisers, and I think they actually said that was their goal, was to distract the appraisers. And then at one point they tried to ask the people actually building a question, and they said, no, leave us alone. So they were a little bit of a detriment to the team rather than being helpful. And if you look at the scoring of this one, they get points for the inches in height, the weight held, the creativity of the materials, and their teamwork. So there's no points for being entertaining or funny. So in this part, they really weren't doing anything to contribute to the instant challenge. You guys have anything to add on that one?
I think that covers it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, I mean, this team obviously had good skill. I mean, their building skills were really good. And if we were doing a performance challenge and we saw a team act really well, we know they have good acting skills. But what we're looking for in a lot of different things is just something that stands out as really unusual, like it says, or different as far as creativity. But as far as teamwork, this team, I would score higher. How would you two score this team?
With this one, I would probably do 6 to 10 range, maybe.
Yeah,
8.
I would say about a 7 or an 8 on their teamwork.
I've always been asked the question, well, what could those two guys have done to do something that was actually constructive? And they could have done something like kept track of time or reread the rules like they were at the end. But they could have been rereading it as they went and said, okay, guys, it needs to be in the taped area. Make sure it's there. Okay, we need to add weights. Where are we going to add those? So there were some things that they could have been doing off to the side that would have been helpful. We certainly don't expect everyone to build because maybe not everyone's a builder, but they can still be doing things that contribute to the overall success of the challenge.
Well, and always asking other team members, do you need help? What can I help with? You know, is pretty standard. If you don't know what to do, or if a team member doesn't know what to do, or doesn't feel like their strengths help in that instant challenge, they can always go to one of their other team members and say, do you need help with something? If you don't need help, I'll reread these rules and see if we're missing anything. Just finding something for that team member to do that actually contributes to what the scoring will be is always preferable. Shall we move on next slide? We ready for that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So this kind of goes back to kind of what we've been saying through this whole time. Before you get to the tournament, practice your instant challenges, do them over again, let them self-evaluate themselves. One thing you can do is, instead of doing that same instant challenge the exact same way, I think Paul mentioned something a little earlier, change the timing. So if it's 5 minutes the first time, the next time they do that instant challenge, say they have to do it in 3 minutes. Or you can take away a material or add a material, or make them do it only with straws or only with note cards. Just change something about the instant challenge. So it doesn't always have to be a completely different instant challenge. You can do the same one, just change something about it so that they're kind of trying different things and learning new skills.
Right, we always get questions that, you know, where do we find instant challenges? And we always suggest, you know, online. And probably the easiest way, like Kara is saying, is just to change an existing challenge. And you can make it completely different just by altering one thing. Take away material, make it shorter. You can also say, okay, I'm going to drop water on your tower before I measure it. Or I'm going to drop some marbles on your tower before I measure it. So those are simple things that you can do to completely change the nature of the challenge without having to think about it too much.
Another thing that I suggest to teams, this may not work for the younger elementary level teams, but an older team, this might work well. Have them write their own challenge. You learn a lot from writing. You start to look for those loopholes and those skills that help in other instant challenges if they write their own. So that might also be another way to help.
Something else that's kind of funny to do, I just put in Montana's DI website, and it's just kind of funny as you search around. They've got some instant challenges here, and then they borrowed some from Iowa that they also put on a link here on their website. So, I mean, it's just kind of funny. Instant challenges get shared a lot, and sometimes you can just search around on different DI websites and find something that's just a little unusual. And you know, I found just little bits on Texas website, sometimes in Virginia. You just kind of start looking around and you find, you know, and a lot of people write their challenges for their teams and then they publish them, and they're not DI challenges, but there's mini challenges and other ones that just are fun. And hopefully, you know, teams have fun doing these. I think this is the part everyone looked forward to when I was doing teams. You know, it's like, what are we going to invent? You know, because we also do DI regular challenges. You know, we bought these CDs that had, I'm showing my age a little, but we had, you know, 5 different volumes of CDs of instant challenges that we'd work through, and then, you know, we'd have team members write them. And, you know, one of my favorite challenges was having an assistant. You know, one of the parents, you know, made an instant challenge once they started coming to some of the meetings and seeing how instant challenge goes. It's a time-consuming thing to set up instant challenges all the time. So if you can get a parent or a team member or somebody who's helping you to do some of the work of the instant challenge, you know, even gathering materials for you, it'll help you out a lot and also give you kind of a little break if you're working with a team and just kind of need to, you know, step back and break for a minute. But anyway, just
Tara?
Yes.
Are you online? Can you open a browser in your window?
Yes. Give me a minute.
And then go to the Colorado DI page, DI Colorado. It's not your main page.
It's in my recent history. That's good,
and then
right?
go to click where it says Team Manager Resources right there. It's up.
Top right.
Up here. I got it.
And then there's instant challenge section there as well.
Right here.
And there's a lot of instant challenges that we've been putting up.
Perfect.
And these
Beginning,
are fun.
middle, and end. Performance, absolutely necessary. When your team sees the word performance, they should automatically think beginning, middle, and end every single time.
And they're always given a piece of paper and a pencil to help plan their performance, and oftentimes those aren't used. And so what I've suggested to teams is write those 3 words, beginning, middle, and end. And like we said, they don't have time to write a whole script, but if they can just write out what happens in the beginning, what happens in the middle, what happens in the end, that can help them make sure that they get that in their performance time for the instant challenge.
So they're learning how to construct a simple timeline, and then, you know, you can add conflict, you can add extra characters, antagonists, you know, and I guess you can decide who's on your team is really good at public speaking and acting.
So one thing that really bothers me about performance challenges is that a lot of teams will come in and treat it like a presentation. Like they're at school and they're giving a book report. And that's not what we want to see. We really want to see the characters and how they can progress through a story. And I don't want them to stand up there and say, this is what we did. My name is Sam and I did this. We really want to see a story.
Do you guys, we have a question from the audience. Is that Bridge and Tower challenge written down? And can you send me a copy so I can send it out?
Yeah, I think I sent it out last week. I can send it out again. I do have a digital copy. Yeah.
All right, great, thanks.
Yeah, I actually can send it to you now if you want me to.
That would be great. Well, I'll just send everything. I'll send everything out to all the attendees in the morning.
Okay.
For some of the new team managers, sometimes you don't have to do an entire challenge. You could even ask each of your team members to just try to do something with a piece of paper. In other words, give them 3 sheets of paper and a rubber band and ask each one of them to do a tripod. or to do, you could take, if you have a team that's large, if like 7 members, you could actually divide into 2 groups and have them both do the challenge as 2 separate teams to just kind of practice. Just for me, finger dexterity is very helpful. A lot of kids have a hard time just building things. Some kids play all the time and do things with their fingers, and others are just, it's completely unusually difficult. And so just making all of your team members practice building, even though they may not be good at it, might be helpful, because if you get to a tournament and you have somebody who's sick, who you were counting on to be your builder or your actor, and if someone else has at least tried it, you've got somebody to back up in case that happens. And it was always the bane of my team. We didn't have very many actors, and sure enough, the one person that we were counting on to really be a good storyteller wasn't available, and it was a tournament, and it stretched everybody, but they had practiced it, and reluctantly they tried it, and I think they were happy because they had at least thought about that ahead of time. So have your teams practice something they're not good at, as well as the things that they know they can do.
Something else that I like to recommend is, I don't know if you all know the show Whose Line Is It Anyway? They've got some great quick thinking. I'm hoping you all know it. They've got some great quick thinking examples of warm-ups you can do. One I really, really love is called the question game, where you're only allowed to talk in questions, and that really gets teams thinking. It's a great thing to do while you're waiting in the holding area right before you go into the room. There's another great game called Excuse Me, What Are You Doing?, where your team stands in a circle, and one team member does an action. The person next to them says, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And then the first person has to say something completely different than the action they're doing. So if they're brushing their teeth, they can say, "Riding a horse." So then the person who said, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" has to pretend to ride a horse. And then the next person says, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" And it goes around in a circle like that. You can't repeat actions. If you are brushing your teeth, you can't say brushing your hair. You can't do anything close to what you're doing. So it helps get them moving and get some of that nervous energy out, and it gets their brain moving as well. And that's also good for the beginning of practices when you meet during the year, to just kind of help with that quick thinking. And it'll help in their main challenge as well, I'm sure. Anything else for this slide, Paul, Andrea?
Well,
I'm just going to stress that there's no such thing as interference before the tournament. So if you see a team that's doing something and you have an idea and you say, "Hey, you could do this with straws," or "Hey, your performance was really typical," you can tell them anything and everything about what they could have done for their instant challenge. The only way you can get interference with instant challenge is if you're there in that room on tournament day and you signal to the team or get up and build something for the team. That wouldn't be okay. But the skills that they learn in the instant challenge can also help them in their central challenge as well. So if they're building something, let's say a tower, and they're a structure team, the things that you teach them about structures in instant challenge can also migrate over to the central challenge. They have to make that connection on their own, but that's something that can also be helpful. So you can help them as much as you want with instant challenge.
All right.
There was one type of challenge. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to remind people, if they have questions, to please go ahead and put them in the question box, and then that way we can get your questions answered. So any question that you have regarding Instant Challenge, our team will be happy to answer.
Sometimes you'll get an Instant Challenge where you have to communicate non-verbally. And the team will divide into two parts eventually. And one group of 3, for example, would be on one side of the room, and they will be given the information that needs to be communicated to the other half of the team on the other side of the room. And then that group usually probably picks up things and puts them in a certain order, or in one case it was fast food orders. I think that was the state challenge last year. They had to fill orders for a restaurant using nonverbal communication. So they had to grab pickles and tomatoes and lettuce and bread and make sandwiches. And they couldn't communicate using words. And when it comes to nonverbal communication, I define that as anything that I could spell as a word, but otherwise, you know, even mouth noises are okay. But what happens in communication challenges is sometimes you need a few pre-agreed to signals that teams will, you know, already know ahead of time. And what I mean by that is it could be as simple as if I clap my hand once, that means yes. If I clap my hand twice, that means no. And whatever else you come up with, most teams need something that that they can say, please repeat that. Or I understand and I've got that, go on to the next one. So anyway, I guess what I'm suggesting is 4 simple communication gestures or noises that you agree to ahead of time in case it is a communication challenge. My team tried to learn Morse code, and when they got nervous in an instant challenge, they completely forgot that. You know, so it has to be something that can be remembered quickly. And then when it comes to communicating with a list, usually both teams have the list that they're looking at. The first team probably has the original list, but now you have the new list. But if you have the original list with you, even those items on that list can be numbered. So if they were looking at 15 different materials or items, all you'd have to do is clap 7 times, and I know that you're talking about item number 7. And then you could clap 3 times, and now you've told everybody on the other side of the room, now it goes in position 3 rather than 7. And all it was just simple clapping. And a lot of times communication challenges are like that. Also, for location on a floor or on a wall, you can devise some kind of a grid like Battleship, like 3 across, 2 down. There was a shoe challenge a couple of years ago, and if teams had simply made a grid, they could have quickly, like Battleship, played you know, the game of 3 across, 2 down, 4 across, 1 down, you know, things like that. So anyway, I guess if there's any questions about that, please send them forward. But for communication challenges, they don't have to be as elaborate. I've seen kids try to say, okay, so when I stomp the floor 3 times, that's the color brown. And then when I clap my hands once, that's the color red. But no one can remember that. It's easier to just make list or grid kind of communications, and then also a yes-no system. If they understand binary code, they could even communicate with even fewer gestures, but that's a little more difficult, especially for an elementary team.
So basically what he's saying is with communication, simpler is better, something that you won't forget once you move on to part 2. But this slide is basically kind of things what we've been saying. Work with different materials to see what they can do. Another great thing to do in practices is just give them a bunch of one material and let them play with it and see what they can do with it. Let them see what they can figure out how to do with foil or with note cards or paper clips. Let them see what they can do. And then when they get into an instant challenge, they've already kind of worked with all of those materials, and so they can do different things with them. Anything else, Paul or Andrea, on this slide?
I think sometimes it's good for teams, if they have a performance challenge, to have just kind of a base story or base set of characters that they can usually go to if they need to. We've seen some teams come in with a song that they've kind of created, like something that goes along to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and they know that melody, and they can use that and change the words, and that's something that we don't see very often in Instant Challenge, is a song or a dance or something like that. So if they can prepare that ahead of time, that can be an element of a performance that can really make them stand out.
And on the heels of that too, even a setting. We had a team that I knew they already were planning on a science fiction type setting, and they came up with an outrageous way of getting around. It was sort of via imagination. I think they must have been thinking about Dune, if you've read that book about when the guild folds space. But they were folding space, and you know, they had a setting, and they even had sound effects that they were using for their story. Team members could make sound effects that were really very funny. You know, so they were having a good time. So I think, you know, you start to encourage team members to, you know, especially ones that have a knack for that kind of thing. They had a lot of fun, and it was a lot of fun for everyone watching. And again, when you go in the room as a team manager, you know, you can see, you know, your challenge, but you won't be able to see, unfortunately, everything that we do. But something that is possible is you can be an appraiser yourself for instant challenge at a different tournament, as long as your team is there. We just don't want interference. But that's another way for you to kind of learn a little bit more about instant challenges by being an appraiser, and then you can watch other teams do some things, and so you can actually pick up on that. And so that's also a way to, you know, kind of, you know, gain a little bit of insight.
Paul, you can only appraise instant challenge after your regional tournament.
Yes, right.
Yeah. But also appraising, you learn a whole lot about the scoring, and it's really beneficial for your teams as well, as you understand more about how other people will score, and you learn and you see more of what other teams can do. It really helps your team as well, the more you can see. So it really, really does help when you appraise. All right, let's see. Next slide here. Multi-part challenges. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier too. Some teams will not realize that it's a one-part challenge and spend their whole time planning and forget to build or forget to do their performance or whatever it is. So be aware that some challenges have 2 parts and some have 1. I've seen a couple that have 3 parts even. So reading the rules again and being very aware of that is really, really important. And I think we've kind of touched on some of this stuff. Another point is it's better to have some points than no points. And so if they're building something and it falls apart at the last minute, help them learn to get something built quick so that they get some kind of points. We don't want them to walk out of the room with no objective points or feeling like they haven't accomplished something. So being able to realize when something isn't working and then change what they're doing and try to get some points. It may not be what they were expecting, but to be able to switch and be okay with changing things if they need to, and learning when that needs to happen and not going after a kind of a lost cause. Anything else, Paul, Andrea?
I don't think so. It's important for teams to ask for time. They can ask for time at any point because they cannot have any sort of timing device with them, so no watches, no phones, no stopwatches, no sundials, no nothing. So they can ask the appraisers for time at any point. So it's important for them to do that so they can keep track of how much time is remaining. That way, if they need to, they can test their structure or put in place a plan B if something isn't working.
I guess all I would want to just say is you can create kind of a list for your team of some of the skills that you think they're developing. One is reading comprehension, the ability to read and understand instructions quickly. And then I'll just read my quick list here. I already mentioned this, being able to build a basic tripod for tower construction or a paper baton as a structural element, basic storytelling components, public speaking skills, listening and team cooperation, understanding balance and strength elements when you're building, and simple and effective nonverbal communication plans, and I guess just learning from your mistakes.
Okay, we have a question regarding timers. That rule was changed this year, either last year or this year, regarding there's no watches of any kind allowed, whether they make noise or I don't know what's going on.
Can you hear that? Is it mice?
I don't know. Can you mute for a second?
Yeah, let me mute. Sorry.
Cara, can you mute for a second? Okay, there we go. Cara, can you mute? Just hit the green button. Okay. So yeah, there are no timekeepers allowed at all. So whether it's a watch that's just a wristwatch that doesn't make noise, that still isn't allowed. There are no iPhones allowed. There are no timing devices of any kind are allowed in the instant challenge room. So that rule is a recent change. Okay. All right.
So the next slide is actually from Global Finals, and this is categories that we look for when we grade work. So we looked at the team shared goals and purpose. So that's one that I call the team that we watched the video on. They all seem to have the same goal because two of them were not focused. Working together and cooperating, and communication, focus on results. That's a big one that I tend to score lower on because that really involves rereading the challenge, making sure that they're completing everything. So, can we have our structure in the taped area? We need to do that. Okay, this is a 4-part challenge. We need to do this, this, and this. So really, really knowing what the rules of the challenge are and knowing what they need to do is that focus on results piece. And then, of course, respect for team members and ideas. So that's where we were discussing it's okay to disagree, but as long as they do that in a respectful way, that's fine. Do you guys have anything to add?
Not really. I just, would stress that instant challenge is definitely sometimes unpredictable. I was just going to mention some of the challenges that we've had that don't even fit exactly into what we've already talked about. For example, one of the instant challenges last year was a bunch of links of chain that were all separated, and you had to use the materials to connect all of the chain links together using different materials. I was just going to ask everyone if you could just kind of mention some of the more unusual challenges that you have seen. And I'll leave that one of the challenges too at Globals, they were actually pouring water on structures. It's happened a couple of times. So sometimes you can mix things up by getting a watering can out and saying, okay, now we're going to add one more element. There was a challenge at Globals that was also a lot of fun using fans, where you built a weather vane. They basically had a pin sticking up in the middle of the floor. You had to build a weather vane. There were 4 fans, which represented wind coming from 4 different directions. I know it's very elaborate, but even just one fan, you could just practice something like this. But it was a lot of fun. Things like that do happen even at the state level. As far as regional level challenges, they're not that difficult. We try to create something that teams will have a better chance for success, but they definitely get more difficult at the state level, and definitely by Globals, they're sometimes very hard. Do you have any favorites, Cara or Andrea, that you've seen?
Gosh, I've seen so many of them. I'm not sure if I can remember all the ones that I've seen.
But just some of the unusual ones that aren't even really, that fit 100% neat and tidy into what we've talked about.
I really, in particular, like some of the risk and reward challenges that have been offered where teams are given a list of 15 objectives to complete. So, for example, one that I saw was that they needed to create a piece of art. And they were using 6 index cards to complete this piece of art. And some of the objectives were things like there's a yellow star on every index card. One index card is completely colored in. So you couldn't obtain those 2 objectives at the same time. So you had to choose which objectives you were going to do and what would maximize your points. So it was impossible to get all 15. And there was actually a point where part 1 was just 1 minute of them discussing strategy. Which ones are we going to do? How are we going to do this? I've always found those really interesting because they're a little different.
There's one that I remember seeing a few years ago, and I think this actually was at a DI After Dark event or a DI Extreme event, that they had to draw a picture or somehow convey to their other team members an action without doing that action. So it's almost like charades or Pictionary, stuff like that, where they had to guess a series of actions without actually doing that action. And it actually seemed to be pretty hard for the team to figure out how to convey kicking a ball without acting out kicking a ball. So that was actually pretty interesting to watch. And it really kind of turned into Pictionary, where they kind of drew out a series of pictures of, ball and then trying to draw the action of kicking. But it was interesting because that's not something that I had seen that often before.
One of the global finals challenges was a giant slingshot, and they were launching, it was a beach ball launcher. And it was kind of inspired, I think, by Angry Birds, because you were given all these blocks that were basically looking sort of like Tetris pieces. And the objective was to make at least 6 towers and then lay them out in a taped off area, and each tower had to be at least, I don't remember, 5 or 6 blocks high. And then you got points if you knocked everything down in one shot. And basically that's kind of a combination of dominoes and, Angry Birds, I guess, in a way. But anyway, it was hugely popular, with everybody who got to test these out before the tournament actually began. They let the appraisers try it out, and it was just a lot of fun. I mean, so anyway, it isn't always, going to be anything that you've ever seen before.
So we have only about 5 more minutes left of this webinar. So if anybody has any questions that they'd like answered that the team hasn't answered so far, we would love to hear your questions. And also, I just want to let you know that this webinar will be on our YouTube channel, and I will post online all of the supporting materials as well as email them out to you. But if you have any questions before we end in about 5 minutes, go ahead and ask them, and then so anyway, ask away. Go ahead, Paul and Andrea and Cara.
Well, I'll just say one last thing. Well, thanks everyone for your time, and Kate for setting this up. As far as buying supplies, some favorite places are the dollar store, Goodwill or thrift stores, Walmart, grocery store, Friends, the kitchen. I mean,
find stuff in your garage. I mean, you can make it work.
Okay.
And if you don't have a certain material, you can always substitute something else. You don't have to have exactly what's on the instant challenge that you pick. You can always pick different materials.
We have a question regarding team roles. Can you address team roles?
People always ask, like, is there a formula? And there really isn't, because a team of 7 boys will look different than a team of 3 girls working together. Age is also a variant there, but typical team roles that you'll see on your screen now when we say leader, that can be somebody that's saying, okay, we've shared ideas, now let's make a decision. Who thinks we should do what? That person's kind of keeping the overall perspective of the challenge in mind and kind of controlling, okay, we've spent enough time brainstorming, now we need to start building. Or time's running out, we need to test this structure. The timekeeper is typically the person that will ask the appraiser how much time is remaining, and they can do that as many times as they want to. They're also the person that's saying, okay, well, this is just part one, we need to finish building, so they can keep that overall challenge in mind as well. The rules reader, that's somebody that looks over the challenge and makes sure that they're completing everything. They'll pay special attention to the scoring elements as well and say, oh, hey, guys, we get 0 or 10 points if we do this, so let's make sure we get that done. So that's typically a person who's really detail-oriented and is really good at reading and comprehending the challenges. Some other rules are, like we had mentioned earlier, if you have a really good performer, they can take the lead in a performance challenge, or a really good builder can take the lead. Those roles can change as the challenge changes. So I would like to see those roles just kind of come about as the team. As the team manager, you can help them define those roles as they practice Instant Challenge more often. And you can say, you know, I think that this person is a good leader, or this person really pays attention to details. So you can help them come to that point.
I think that's a good cover. Any other questions?
There's none right now online, so you have still a couple minutes if you have anything else you'd like to share.
We just appreciate the team managers. I mean, you guys really have the hard job of working with the kids every day. And if you have any questions or need any advice from us, just feel free to email us. That's what we're here for. So anything you need at all.
Absolutely.
And also, I don't know if some of you are in contact with other team managers in your areas, but you could create an instant challenge day just between two teams and have two teams come work together. So like if you have an elementary team, you can find a team that's a little more experienced, and you could do instant challenge simultaneously with an experienced team, so that your team can learn a little bit more about it as you go as well.
And believe it or not, sometimes the high school teams can learn from the elementary teams as well. Typically the elementary tend to be a little bit more creative, we find, because they don't use themselves as much. And the high school teams will see them a little bit more.
All right. Well, again, this will be on our YouTube channel when I get it up. It might not be tomorrow, but it will be by the end of the week. And we will get out the supporting documents to you as soon as we can. And I want to thank Andrea and Paul and Cara for helping us out tonight. And I would just like to reiterate what they said, and that please give us a call or email any one of us, and we can make sure your question is answered. We just don't like it when people don't ask questions, because we really do want to help, and that's what we do.
Yeah, what she said.
All right. So if there's nothing anyone else particularly wants to add, or there's no more questions, we wish you a very good night, and thank you for being with us, and thanks to Paul and Cara and Andrea. Thanks, guys.
All right, well, thanks.
Of course. Thanks, Kate.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
You guys did a nice job.